In this Lenten season, I would like to invite you to reflect with me on the last 7 words of Jesus from the cross. As we are entering the first week of Lent, let us first recall the first words of Jesus on the cross. Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do. For whom did Jesus pray for his Father to forgive while he was being hanged on the cross through his last hours on earth? In fact, there were many people who were involved in the suffering and the death of Jesus, and among them are the religious leaders of Israel who schemed to arrest Jesus secretly, the Jewish leaders who demanded the Romans put Jesus to death, the Romans who crucified Jesus, and the people of Israel who shouted to crucify Jesus and to release Barabbas. It is obvious that the death of Jesus was organized by a diverse group of people who came together to crucify him. The suffering of Jesus in the last hours of his life on earth was intense pain and was an atoning sacrifice. Jesus was beaten at the pillows by Roman soldiers who are expert at torture and death. Jesus was stripped of his clothes and restrained. He was beaten again and again with a Roman flagrum, which is a whip that has a multi-thorn design used to inflict severe pain through corporal punishment. It is for sure that Jesus' face must have been swollen, his eyes blackened, his nose bloodied, and his whole body traumatized after the abusive Roman soldiers tortured and flogged him. Jesus was beaten, exhausted, and lost a lot of blood, but he still had to carry the cross to Golgotha. With the heavy weight of the cross and the exhaustion of his strength, he fell down 3 times while carrying the cross to Golgotha. On the hill of Golgotha, the soldiers took their hammers and long metal spikes and nailed Jesus to a beam of wood. They lifted Jesus up on the wooden pole and dropped the pole into a hole in the ground. Hanging on the cross for roughly 6 hours, Jesus suffered greatly. His flesh was torn because of severe torture. His face was disfigured and his beard ripped off from his face. His head was cut deeply because of a crown of thorns that caused much bleeding and blood running into his eyes. His wrists and his feet were bleeding and stretched out because of his body weight pulling from the cross. Few have ever endured the suffering that Jesus suffered on the cross. And indeed, no one but Jesus has ever borne the weight of sin to save humankind. Even though Jesus has suffered greatly, he did not curse the enemies who persecuted and nailed him on the cross. Rather, Jesus asked for intercession of God the Father to forgive the persecutors. Jesus practiced what he had taught, even on the cross and in the midst of his horrible suffering. Love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you. Jesus was consistent in his message and mission up until his very last breath. Even in his greatest torment and suffering, Jesus cared deeply for oppressors, and he modeled his prayer of pardon and forgiveness for the soldiers. Jesus was crucified on the cross, and indeed, his pain is beyond our imagination. For sure, there is no part of Jesus' body that was not suffering to the limits. But he still prayed for the intention of forgiveness of his enemies. Will we, all following the example of Jesus, so that we beg God to forgive those who hurt, offended, and saddened us? And can we all pray for those who hate and struggle to forgive and to let go of animosity in our present lives? And remember, Jesus has always been inviting us to pray and forgive our oppressors, not only in this Lenten season, but every day of our lives. He wants us to be sincere of heart and to cry out, Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do.